Greetings and welcome to week 5, our forum question this week on neuroscience and the soul. And so you're beginning to read, hopefully, out of that particular book. And this is going to be a philosophical turn, if you will, away a bit from the theological and biblical emphasis of last week. So week number 5 is titled Scripture, Theology, Science, and Human Nature, Part 2. Our main topics are philosophy and the mind-body problem, dealing with primarily composition of human persons, unity of consciousness, top-down causation and the critique of that, and emergence and causal powers and the critique of that. So this week delves much deeper into the philosophical aspect of who we are in terms of human composition. I want to encourage you strongly to read the introduction before you dive into the chapters. The introduction section on chapters 1 through 6 is really helpful. It gives a good overview. It's a bit more accessible, if you will, right off the bat. So the bottom of page 2 in your text, it starts with chapter 1 overview through page 4, dealing with the last few chapters, or chapter 5, and then the reply. So I'd encourage you there first. Go there first, get your overview. And also the supplemental materials this week I think are helpful. As last week, there are a lot of materials available, and I've chosen a couple of those on psychological reflection on human nature. Richard Mao from Fuller, the Imago Dei and Philosophical Anthropology, I think that's a top piece, good quality work. And then Swinburne and O'Connor on neuroscience and the soul, an interview. So I think those will be helpful. The previous week, week 4, there was a lot of additional material. I hope you've taken advantage or took advantage of that. Much of it surrounding the debate itself directly with the question of the week. So this week's forum question is related directly to the readings in the textbook. In NAS, or Neuroscience and the Soul, you have 4 different Christian philosophers discussing the mind-body problem. And that, again, overarching focus is on human composition. But they go in different trajectories. So I'm asking you to read these chapters. The 4 primary advocates of their views are Bill Hasker, a longtime philosopher, as well as J.P. Moreland, longtime philosopher. And both of those are advocating some sort of dualism. They differ on how they approach that, and perhaps even the end game, if you will, for what that means. They are critiqued, or their views are replied to by monists who are also emergentists, and that would be Tim O'Connor and Jason Runyon. And they take a different take and critique their interlocutors. And then there's a rejoinder to both Runyon and O'Connor by Moreland and Hasker, respectively. So I think you'll find it a fascinating read. It's deep. You will need to read, if this is your first real deep read in this particular philosophical area, it's going to take 2 or 3 reads, to be frank, and slowly would be my encouragement. I still deal with a number of different terms and ideas myself. After all these years, there's such a variety and a variety of use in terms of some of these concepts. So having a dictionary nearby would be helpful. There's online dictionary of philosophy, internet dictionary of philosophy. There's, of course, many others as well available to you. You can Google that, or you can use the Fuller library to find additional sources. But some of those, like Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, is readily available. So this week we're asking you to evaluate these particular views, primarily either Hasker and O'Connor or Moreland and Runyon. So an either or here. We want you to look into these particular areas more deeply, one or the other. Although we'd like you to read, of course, the whole of these sections. And then the goal is for you to be able to briefly explain the main primary thesis and argument made by either Hasker or Moreland. So what are they arguing for? What do they believe? What do they holds water in the argument? And what is their argument? And then secondly, can you concisely summarize the reply from O'Connor or Runyon and say why they, what is their point, why they don't agree with their um, opponent, if you will, on this particular topic, although they're friends. And then finally, discuss and defend your proposed standpoint. Which do you think is more solid? And include also how that contributes, your view contributes to Christian spirituality or particular spiritual practices, either or both and if you'd like. Um, Neither of these particular views is seen as absolute or essential to the core of Christian faith, okay, or salvation for sure not. But they do have an impact. The different perspectives do influence the way in which we understand ourselves, our makeup, how God relates to us, where we come from, what really we're made of. I mean, that's pretty important in terms of that question being answered. What does it mean? The Imago Dei discussion doesn't really come up too much in this conversation, but I think that's an important question to keep in mind as well. What does it mean to have or be in or reflect the image of God? If we are a dual being in some way or monistic, singular in terms of essence or substance. So even some of the terminology that's used, you're going to find there's not always a perfect agreement on what the terms mean. It's somewhat of a language game. Wittgenstein might say, well, how are you using terms? In this case, like essence or substance or mental causation or physicalism, dualism. It matters that you use terms that probably stay very close to what's most well accepted, although, again, there's some areas here for disagreement. So I hope you'll enjoy this week's work. As you go through the text, again, let me remind you to read the introduction first. You'll notice that there's a different direction from Hasker and his reply interlocutor as well as Moreland. So find which of those you want to most clearly respond to, and please do so concisely and as precisely as possible. And definitely we'll look forward to seeing what you have to say. And may God bless you in this process of hopefully further clarification in terms of philosophy and the mind-body problem as part of the question of who we are as beings made in the Imago Dei.